I was having dinner last week with a friend named Elias. He's 34, a successful architectural consultant with a physique he maintains with the discipline of a professional athlete. By every traditional metric of social and biological value, Elias is exactly the kind of man who should be at the center of a thriving family. He is the alpha that governments are currently trying to bribe with tax credits and housing subsidies to fix the plummeting birth rates of 2026. But as we talked, Elias showed me something on his phone that felt like a glimpse into a cold, clinical future. It wasn't a dating app. It was a sophisticated, AI-integrated dashboard he'd built to manage his life, his investments, his fitness, and his social energy. When I asked him why he wasn't dating, he didn't complain about money or the wrong women. Instead, he described the modern relationship market as a broken algorithm. He spoke with a terrifyingly calm detachment, explaining that the return on investment for a legal marriage in the current system was effectively deep in the red. Why would I enter a contract, he asked, where the other party is incentivized to walk away with half the assets I've built, while my biological role is reduced to a paycheck? He wasn't angry, he was just finished. He looked exactly like what the behavioral scientist John Calhoun described in his infamous mouse utopia experiments. One of the beautiful ones. These were the healthy, sleek, perfectly groomed males who simply stopped competing, stopped mating, and turned entirely inward as their society reached a peak of density and a void of purpose. Seeing Elias, wealthy, capable, and completely biologically dormant, made me realize that the population black hole we are facing isn't an economic crisis. It's something much deeper. It is a collective silent off switch being flipped in the human brain. We are witnessing a global reproductive strike, a biological mutiny against a digital and legal environment that has made the ancient act of human bonding feel like a terminal risk. To understand why the world is emptying out, we have to look past the bank accounts and into the distorted evolution of the 2026 mind. That passage, honestly, every time I read it back, it just sits heavy in the room.
It's a lot to take in.
It's that phrase, biologically dormant, that really gets me. It feels like we're talking about a sci-fi novel or, some dystopian future timeline. Oh, and then I realize Elias is basically 3 or 4 guys I went to college with. He's my neighbor. He might be listening right now.
It's haunting because it is familiar. And I think that is exactly why we're starting here today. It's Sunday, February 1st, 2026. And look, we could spend the next hour just throwing charts and graphs at you. And frankly, they're catastrophic.
I've seen the latest report.
Right. The European Union has officially recorded a fertility rate of 1.38. South Korea just broke its own floor again, dropping to 0.72. But if you just look at the spreadsheet, you miss the actual story.
You miss the human element.
You miss the why.
Right, because the spreadsheet says economic crisis. It says labor shortage. It says who is going to pay for the pensions. But Elias isn't worried about labor shortages. He's not sitting at dinner worrying about the GDP of the Eurozone. He's worried about... Well, he's not worried at all.
That's the problem.
He's checked out.
Exactly. The why is missing from the headlines. Why is a healthy, wealthy, successful 34-year-old man checking out of the gene pool? We aren't just going to list birth rates today. We are going to attempt to autopsy the social contract. And we have 3 very specific case studies, real human archetypes, that I think explain this population black hole.
And I want to be really clear to everyone listening right now that this gets dark. I mean, we are going to be talking about concepts like digital hypergamy, behavioral sinks, and rational withdrawal. But we aren't here to moralize, are we? We aren't here to say men need to step up or women are being too picky.
No judgment. That is the rule for today. We are stripping away the politics, all the culture war noise, and we are looking at this strictly through the lens of behavioral ecology. If you treat humans like rational biological organisms responding to a new distorted environment, suddenly none of this is crazy. Elias isn't crazy. It's kind of inevitable.
Okay, let's peel back the first layer then. I want to talk about the ghost of Seoul. This is the story of Min-jin.
Ghost of Seoul.
So I want you to picture Min-jin. He's 29 years old. He lives in a clean, pretty modest apartment in the Gangnam district. Not the super expensive part, but close enough to commute. He works in back-end server maintenance for a mid-sized tech firm.
A good, stable job.
A very good, stable job. By 1990 standards, or even, frankly, 2010 standards, Min-jin is a catch. He is the backbone of the middle class. Steady income, kind smile, no criminal record, wants a family someday. But in 2026, He's effectively invisible.
When you say invisible, you don't mean he's a hermit, right? He goes out, he has friends.
No, I mean digitally invisible. I was reading through a whole series of posts he made on a localized forum, sort of documenting his experience over the last 3 years. He treated his dating life like a job.
He was systematic about it.
He swiped. He crafted the perfect bio. He paid for the gold tier subscriptions to boost his profile. He estimated he swiped right at over 12,000 profiles in 3 years.
12,000. Just absolute deafening silence. Maybe a match here or there that turned out to be a bot, or someone trying to sell him crypto.
Right.
Or a conversation that just fizzled out after 2 messages. He came to this really bleak conclusion. He realized that the algorithms were not designed to match him. He said he was competing against a digital illusion of infinite choice.
Yes.
And eventually he didn't get angry. He didn't go online and scream about women. He just stopped. He deleted the apps. He realized that in a market where the average is rendered invisible by AI expectations, he essentially does not exist as a romantic entity.
You know, hearing Min Jin's story, it triggers the economist in me. What he is describing, in market terms, is a liquidity collapse.
Yeah, because usually when I hear liquidity collapse, I'm thinking about banks failing, like Lehman Brothers or something. It's the same basic mechanism. For any market to function, whether it's for stocks or real estate or dating, you need a bid and an ask that are close enough to make a deal.
A buyer and a seller have to agree on a price.
Exactly. Min Jin is a buyer in this market. He has currency, his job, his stability, his personality. But the market has been so distorted, so warped, that his currency is valued at 0.
But why? I mean, is he just not good looking enough? Is everyone just that much shallower now?
It's not about people being shallow. I mean, not entirely. It's about the mathematics of the platform itself. You sent me the data on the sexual Gini coefficient, and we really need to spend some time on this because the numbers are, well, they're staggering.
Yeah, I had to read that study twice. I know Gini coefficients from economics, for income inequality, like Brazil has a high Gini coefficient, Sweden has a low one.
Correct. A Gini coefficient of 0 is perfect equality. Everybody has the exact same income. A coefficient of 1 means one person owns everything.
Total inequality.
Total. And historically, a stable functioning society usually sits somewhere around 0.3. If you get above 0.5, you are usually looking at a failed state. You're looking at a kleptocracy or a feudal society right before a revolution. It means riots in the streets.
Okay, and where? Where is the Tinder economy?
The researchers calculated the Gini coefficient for the dating app economy at 0.58.
0.58.
Yes.
So the dating market has worse inequality than a banana republic.
Yes, it is a winner-take-all economy. And the data suggests the distribution is far more extreme than the old Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule.
Right, the idea that 80% of the results come from 20% of the causes. Or in dating, I guess, 80% of the women want the top 20% of men.
It's actually worse now. The 2026 data we're looking at suggests an 80-22 split, but when you dig into it, it gets even more skewed. A deeper analysis shows that the bottom 80% of men are effectively competing for the bottom 22% of men.
Okay, so the bottom 80% of guys
are all fighting over the same smaller pool of women at the bottom. But conversely, the top 78% of women are all funneling their attention toward the top 20% of men.
And let's just process that for a second. That means the vast majority of men, 80% of them, guys like Min Jin, who are perfectly fine, are fighting over scraps.
Actually, yes.
But more importantly, it means that the majority of women are only looking at that tiny top tier. They aren't even seeing Min Jin. His profile might as well be invisible.
We call this phenomenon hypervisibility. The top tier of men, the wealthy, the extremely attractive, the guys with the curated alpha profiles like Elias, they monopolize the attention. They have what feels like infinite options.
And everyone else.
Meanwhile, Min Jin suffers from sexual resource deflation. His value has been artificially crashed by the algorithm he's trying to use.
And I don't get it. Why does the algorithm do that? Wouldn't it make more business sense for the app to match Min Jin so he stays happy and keeps subscribing?
No, because happy and married means a deleted app. The app is a business. Its goal isn't your happiness, it's your retention. It's a Skinner box designed for dopamine.
So it's about keeping you on the hamster wheel.
It's all about keeping you on the wheel. Think about the user experience for a woman on these platforms. Her feed is not a random sample of the male population. It is algorithmically curated. It shows her the top 0.1%, the influencers, the models, the guys renting Lamborghinis for a photo shoot, and it mixes them in with the regular profiles.
So it completely resets her baseline.
Exactly. It resets her internal anchor for what an average partner looks like. If you spend 3 hours a day scrolling through profiles of men who are 6'2", have six-pack abs, and appear to be vacationing in Dubai every weekend,
Your brain starts to think that's normal.
your brain, which evolved to see maybe 50 eligible men in an entire lifetime, starts to believe that this is the new average, the available pool.
It creates a massive cognitive distortion.
The brain says, why should I settle for Minjin with his Honda Civic and his server job when I just swiped left on a guy who looks like a movie star? The digital illusion of infinite choice creates what psychologists call the paradox of choice.
Which is when you have too many options, so you choose nothing.
You freeze. When you think you have infinite better options, just one swipe away, you don't commit to anything. You just keep swiping, chasing that dopamine hit of a better match.
And that's the liquidity collapse you were talking about.
The top tier creates high churn, lots of short-term flings, no commitment, because why would you commit when you have an infinite supply of new options? And the bottom tier, Minjin, and millions like him, has zero liquidity, no transactions, no dates, nothing.
The market has seized up.
And that leads to the collapse. Minjin isn't an incel. He's not radicalized or angry. He's a rational actor in a broken market. He looked at the game, he realized the house edge was basically 100%, and he simply put his chips in his pocket and walked out of the casino.
Deplatformed by an algorithm. It's terrifying because it's so clinical. He's just gone from the market.
And that brings us to the other side of this coin. Minjin was forced out of the game. But what about the people who have the status, who could compete, but are voluntarily choosing to exit?
The voluntary extinction. This moves us away from the cold algorithms of Seoul and takes us to a high-rise apartment in London. I want to introduce you to Elena.
Elena is a fascinating and a very modern case study.
Yes. So Elena is 28. She works in PR, a good job. She lives in one of those micro-luxury apartments, you know, they're minimalist. Everything is white and chrome and perfectly clean.
Very curated.
Extremely curated. I found her story in a lifestyle piece about the rise of the solo living movement. Elena describes her life as frictionless.
Frictionless. That is a very key word.
She has optimized every single aspect of her existence. She orders her food via drone delivery. She has a 12-step chemical skincare regimen that takes an hour every single night. Her weekends are spent in a high-end VR suite where she explores digital worlds.
She's built a perfect, controllable bubble.
A perfect bubble. But when the interviewer asked her about dating, about relationships, Elena physically recoiled. She described physical intimacy as messy. She used words like smelly, intrusive, and primitive.
That is the tell. That's the key insight into her mindset.
And the article made it clear. She isn't depressed. She's not sitting at home crying into a pint of ice cream because she's lonely. She feels superior. She feels like she has evolved past the need for the messiness of another human being.
So she represents a voluntary exit from the gene pool?
Exactly. The digital environment is simply more rewarding and controllable for her than the biological one ever could be.
Elena is the perfect modern embodiment of what the ethologist John Calhoun called the beautiful ones.
I dropped that name in the intro, the Mouse Utopia guy. But we really need to unpack this experiment because every time I hear the details, it feels less like a science experiment from the 60s and more like a prophecy for 2026.
As it's chillingly prescient. So let's go back to the late 1960s, early 70s. John Calhoun builds this thing he calls Universe 25. It's a massive enclosure for mice.
Paradise for mice.
Paradise. Unlimited food, unlimited water, perfect climate control, zero predators, no disease. The only thing that was limited was space.
Okay, so paradise, but a crowded one eventually.
He introduces 4 pairs of healthy mice. And at first, it's a party. The population explodes. Everything is great. They're breeding. They're thriving. But as the population grows, the enclosure starts to fill up. Now, it never runs out of food. There's always enough food. But it runs out of social space. The mice can't escape each other. There's no privacy, no territory.
And that's when the behavioral sinks start.
Right, that's the term he coined. The social fabric just, it tears apart. You see hyper-aggression in some males. Gangs form. You see females losing their maternal instincts. They start abandoning the babies or even attacking them. It's absolute chaos.
Social breakdown.
Total social breakdown. But then as the chaos peaks, a new group emerges. A strange new cohort of mice. The beautiful ones.
Describe them like.
These were males, and eventually females too, who just checked out. They completely withdrew from society. They didn't fight for territory. They didn't court females. They didn't mate. They retreated to the upper levels of the enclosure, away from all the violence and chaos.
Then what did they do all day?
All they did was eat, sleep, and groom themselves.
They groomed themselves.
Obsessively. That's why he named them that. Their coats were sleek and perfect. They had no scars because they never fought. They looked physically pristine, hence the beautiful ones, but they were socially dead. They had zero interest in any interaction. They were just autistically sealed off from the rest of their species.
That is Elena. That is the 12-step skincare routine. That is the gym obsession. That is the curated apartment.
It is the exact same biological mechanism playing out in humans. Elena focuses on aesthetic perfection, the perfect gym body, the curated Instagram feed. But she has completely disengaged from the messy, unpredictable work of courtship and reproduction.
We see this with the herbivore men in Japan, too.
Yes, the Tsushoku Danshi. It's the same phenomenon. And now we see it emerging in the West with women like Elena. It's a cross-cultural, cross-gender response.
Why? Why does the brain do that? Is it a conscious choice?
It's more of a biological stress response. Calhoun theorized that when the social velocity gets too high, when you are constantly bombarded by other beings, other signals, the brain shuts down complex social behaviors as a self-preservation mechanism. He called it pathological togetherness.
And a modern city, London or New York or Seoul, that's the enclosure. That's our Universe 25.
We are more technologically connected than ever before. You walk down a crowded street, you get on a packed subway, and then you go home and you open Twitter or TikTok, and you are immediately bombarded by the thoughts and faces and dramas of millions of people.
You are psychologically crowded 24/7, even when you're alone.
So the brain, that primitive lizard part of the brain, just says, too much input. Density is too high, competition is too fierce, interaction is draining, I am withdrawing to the upper levels of the enclosure.
And Calhoun had a name for where this ends. He called it death squared, right?
The two deaths. It's a terrifying concept. The first death, he said, is the death of the spirit. It's the cessation of complex social organization, of courtship, of maternal instinct. The mice were still physically alive, but they weren't mice anymore. They were just biological units consuming resources and grooming.
They had lost the mouseness.
They'd lost their software. And the second death,
The physical extinction of the population.
correct, because once the beautiful ones emerged, the population never recovered. Even when the population dropped back down and there was plenty of space again, the remaining mice had forgotten how to mate. They had forgotten how to be social. The colony went to zero.
That chills me to the bone. They forgot how to mate. You look at Elena, perfectly happy in her VR suite, finding real humans gross and primitive, and you realize we are watching the first death in real time.
The social velocity required to maintain a complex civilization has stalled out. We have built a world that is so comfortable, so optimized, so friction-free, that the actual friction of human connection now feels like an assault.
So we have Minjun, who's been erased by the algorithm. We have Elena, who is retreating into the behavioral sink. But there is a third category of person, and this one feels the most deliberate. This isn't about being ignored, and it's not about being overwhelmed. It's about looking at the contract on the table and saying, no deal.
This is the story of David. This is the rational withdrawal.
Let's talk about Dave. He's in New York, a high-earning professional, law degree, very sharp guy. I was reading a legal blog where he detailed his decision-making process. David recently refused to sign a marriage license with his long-term partner.
A partner he presumably loves and wants to be with.
Yes, exactly. Instead, he opted for what he calls a life pact, which is basically a glorified roommate agreement with some very detailed asset separation clauses.
And I'm sure he got a lot of heat for that decision.
Oh, massive heat. People online called him a commitment phobe, a misogynist, selfish, you name it. But David's response was fascinating. He stripped all of the emotion out of it. He talked about it purely in terms of risk-reward ratios.
He treated it like a business decision.
Completely. He watched his father and his older brother go through the family court system. He saw them lose not just their assets, half their retirement, the family home, but their psychological stability, their health.
He used a phrase that really stuck with me from that piece. He called the modern marriage contract a freight train of risk.
And here is where we have to apply our demoralized analysis, as you called it. It is very, very easy to judge David. But if we look at him as a rational economic actor, is he wrong?
Well, is he? From a purely contractual standpoint.
In many jurisdictions, no. David views marriage through the lens of what he calls contractual asymmetry. Okay, imagine you're starting a business. You and a partner. Partner A, that's David, puts up 100% of the capital. Years of work, savings, investment. Partner B puts up $0. But the contract says that at any point, for any reason or no reason at all, no fault, Partner B can dissolve the partnership.
And walk away with 50% of the capital that partner A put in.
Exactly. Plus, potentially a guaranteed salary or alimony for the next 10 years.
No venture capitalist on earth would sign that deal. It would be professional malpractice.
Exactly. And that is how men like David and Elias from your intro are beginning to view modern marriage. They see it as a liability where they provide the provision, the capital, but the other party holds a no-fault exit option that can trigger total asset liquidation.
So David's argument is, I'm not anti-women, I'm anti-bad contract.
Right. He called it rational economic withdrawal. Yeah. And you have to view this within the broader context of what we've called the vice of modernity, that demographic reckoning.
The economic squeeze.
The squeeze. Look at the life of a 30-year-old in 2026. Housing costs are insane. Home ownership is a fantasy for most, and rent eats up 50% of your take-home pay. Student debt hangs over you like a dark cloud, delaying family formation by at least a decade.
So the opportunity cost of having children has just skyrocketed.
It has gone through the roof. You are calculating the massive cost of children, the money, the time, the sleep, the career progression, against a lifestyle of autonomy, travel, and consumption. And then, on top of that already huge mountain of cost, you add the legal risk of divorce that could financially wipe you out.
The calculation goes deep into the red. It's not just risky. For many, it feels like financial suicide.
That's how David sees it. He's not acting out of malice. He's acting out of pure self-preservation.
And this brings us to the government's response, doesn't it? Because they see this happening.
I mentioned South Korea earlier. They're terrified of this. They are seeing the Davids and the Min Juns and the Elenas, and they are panicking. So they're just throwing money at the problem.
An absolutely incredible amount of money. Since 2006, I believe, South Korea has spent over $270 billion on pronatalist policies. Cash bonuses for babies, housing subsidies, cheap loans for young couples. They even organize state-sponsored dating events, government-run blind dates.
$270 billion.
Yeah.
You could build a colony on Mars for that.
The fertility rate dropped to 0.72, the lowest in the recorded history of the world during peacetime.
That is a spectacular, unbelievable failure. Why? If David is worried about money, shouldn't a cash bonus help solve the problem?
David called the tax credits pennies in the face of a freight train. Right. The failure in South Korea gives us the crucial insight here. The government is treating this as a financial problem.
A spreadsheet problem.
They think it's a symptom to be managed with a pill, with a cash injection. But it is actually a structural and social problem. It's the etiology, the root cause of the disease that is rotten.
They're treating the cough, but the patient has lung cancer.
The pathology. The policies are fundamentally paternalistic. State-sponsored dating events assume that people want to date but just can't find a nice venue. They completely ignore the behavioral sink. They ignore that people like Elena are actively repulsed by the idea. They ignore that Min Yoon has already checked out of the game entirely.
And they also ignore the institutional incoherence when it comes to women.
Right? A massive incoherence. In South Korea, and frankly in much of the West too, we educate women to be high-powered career professionals. They outperform men in universities across the board. But the social structure, the cultural expectation, still assumes they will carry the full domestic load. The cooking, the cleaning, the child-rearing, the mental loads. So the marriage strike isn't just men like David refusing financial risk. It is also highly educated, successful women refusing to take on the double burden. Why would a successful lawyer or doctor sign a contract that implicitly turns her into a domestic servant?
And why would a successful man sign a contract that turns him into a walking ATM with a target on his back?
Both sides are looking at the deal on the table, and both sides are independently concluding no.
It is a rational response from both genders to a deal that just looks bad for everyone involved.
Yes. We have the algorithmic collapse creating this brutal winner-take-all mating market. We have the behavioral sink causing a biological shutdown from overstimulation, and we have the contractual failure driving a rational economic withdrawal.
These aren't separate issues, are they? They're feedback loops.
They are absolutely feedback loops. They're accelerating each other. And this brings us to a concept from evolutionary biology that I think explains where this is all heading. It's called the Fisherian runaway.
Fisherian runaway? That sounds like a sci-fi thriller.
It's a fascinating and slightly terrifying concept.
Okay, the big, beautiful, colorful feathers.
Right. Why does a peacock have that tail? From a purely survivalist perspective, it's a disaster. It's heavy, it's cumbersome, it makes the birds slow and extremely easy for tigers to catch. It is metabolically expensive to grow. It is, strictly speaking, a survival disadvantage.
So why did evolution keep it? Why did it get so big?
Because the peahens, the females, started selecting for it. They used it as a proxy for health. The thinking was, if this male can survive despite carrying that giant handicap, he must have really strong genes.
Makes sense.
But then the preference got locked in and became self-reinforcing. The peahens preferred bigger tails, so the males with bigger tails mated more, and their sons had bigger tails, and the daughters inherited the preference for bigger tails. The tails got bigger and bigger and bigger over generations. It became a runaway process. The very trait that was being selected for mating became the trait that threatened the species' long-term survival.
And you're applying this to humans in 2026.
Look at our digital mating market. What are we selecting for? What traits get the most swipes?
We're selecting for the best photo, the most filtered skin, the most obvious display of wealth, whether it's real or rented, the curated influencer lifestyle.
We are selecting for performative traits. We're selecting for things that look good on a 6-inch screen, but we are not selecting for generative traits.
What do you mean by generative traits?
The things that actually generate a stable family. We aren't selecting for loyalty, we aren't selecting for stability, we aren't selecting for the patience required to raise a screaming toddler at 3 a.m. We're not selecting for kindness or a shared sense of humor that can last 50 years.
We're breeding a population of human peacocks who look incredible on Instagram, but can't actually survive a real long-term relationship.
The market mechanisms, the apps, amplify the superficial signals, and they filter out the substantive ones. We have optimized ourselves for success in the digital dating market, but in doing so, we have made ourselves incompatible with the family structure itself.
That connects right back to the off switch from the intro. It feels like people like Elias and David, they're realizing the game is rigged to produce this outcome, so they're just flipping the board over.
Or just walking away from the table entirely. The sources describe this as a stoic response. Men and women are adopting a kind of stoic indifference. They are realizing that if the dating market is a rigged casino, the only winning move is not to play.
Reclaiming what one source called psychological sovereignty.
Yes, and you see people channeling that energy elsewhere. They're focusing on achieving winner effects through solitary pursuits, building a career, getting a perfect physique like Elias, mastering a video game, learning a skill.
Things you can control.
Things you can control.
Yeah.
These things provide dopamine, they provide a sense of progress and mastery, but they don't carry the risk of rejection or divorce court or the ick and messiness of intimacy that Elena talked about.
It's a survival strategy for the individual,
but a death sentence for the society.
That is the core paradox of this entire crisis.
What is perfectly rational for David to protect his assets and perfectly rational for Elena to protect her peace is collectively fatal for the civilization. We are looking at a civilizational verdict.
A verdict? What do you mean by that?
The empty cradle is a vote. It is a mass vote of no confidence in the future structure of our society. We have spent the last 70 years building a world of maximum individual freedom, freedom from messy relationships, freedom from obligation and friction-free consumption. But the cost of that freedom was the destruction of the glue. We destroyed the interdependence that makes biological continuity possible.
We optimized ourselves right out of existence.
Yes. The most chilling part of the Universe 25 experiment is the conclusion. Once the beautiful ones emerge, the population does not recover. Even if you take them out and introduce new, healthy mice into the enclosure, the social patterns are shattered. The colony simply fades away to zero.
From the algorithmic erasure of Minjun in Seoul, to the comfortable extinction of Elena in London, to the calculated, rational withdrawal of David in New York.
And the common thread through all of it is that this isn't a problem you can fix with a tax break or a government program. It is a structural adaptation. It is the human animal responding rationally to the cage we've built for ourselves.
We promised we would leave you with a final thought, something to chew on as you go about your week. The source material ends with a perspective that reframes this entire crisis. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, this isn't a tragedy. Maybe it's a form of rebellion. When the social contract becomes a cage of liabilities and the mating market becomes a digital hallucination, extinction stops feeling like a tragedy. It starts feeling like the only rational rebellion left, as the source material suggests. When the contract of civilization becomes a shackle, ending the bloodline is the provider class's final, silent mutiny against nature itself. And kiddo, Thank you for listening to this deep dive.